The argument being presented is that the grid failures and the crazy high energy prices we're seeing. All right, so today we're diving into a really provocative idea from our source material. It's the claim that the growing instability we're seeing in our power grid, well, it isn't an accident. Let's break down this argument titled Why They Want You to Lose Power. You know that feeling? You flip a switch and for just a split second, there's this little knot of anxiety, a small worry that, hey, maybe this time the lights just won't come on. Yeah, if that hits home, you are definitely not alone. From warnings about rolling blackouts to those outages that seem to come out of nowhere, worrying about our power grid is kind of becoming a normal part of life. But here's the thing. The source material we're looking at today offers a very specific and frankly pretty unsettling argument for why this is all happening. It suggests this isn't just a string of bad luck. So where does this whole argument even start? Well, it begins with the things we can all see and feel, right? Flickering lights and, you guessed it, rising bills. The source points to some pretty big red flags, saying these aren't just abstract fears, they're real events. I mean, think about the record high energy prices hitting families all over the country, or the massive grid failures we saw in Texas. And what about the constant blackouts in California? According to this perspective, these are all just symptoms of a much bigger issue. Okay, so if those are the symptoms, what's the diagnosis? This brings us right to the heart of the argument, that we have a system that is seriously under strain. And the reason why is, well, it's an unsettling idea. And boom, here it is, the central claim from our source, laid out as plainly as possible. The strain we're seeing on our energy system is not an accident, it is intentional. The source material puts it just like this, and I'm quoting here. The energy crisis is not an accident, but a calculated erosion of the grid. You gotta notice that word, calculated. That's the key, because it implies there's a deliberate strategy at play here. Okay, hold on. This obviously brings up a massive question that needs an answer. If we just go with this idea for a second, how in the world could something like this actually be happening on such a huge scale? Well, the source argues the answer lies in a specific policy link. They call it the net zero connection, and this is described as the actual mechanism that's making it all happen. To really get this argument, you have to see power the way the source does. They basically split it into two buckets. First, you've got your traditional baseload power. Think coal, gas, and nuclear. This is like the bedrock of the grid. It's always on, giving us a constant, super reliable flow of energy. Then you've got intermittent renewables, like wind and solar. The argument here is that since they rely on the weather, the power they generate is variable and, a lot less predictable. So, how does the source connect all these dots? They lay out this four-step process. First, it starts with a huge policy push for net zero goals. This, they argue, forces the shutdown of those reliable baseload power plants way too early. Next, those dependable plants are replaced with less reliable renewables. And the alleged result of all this? A power grid that's just fundamentally weaker and can't bounce back as easily. But that just explains the how, right? It doesn't get to the why. And this is where the source takes it a step further, asking, is energy a right or is it a privilege? This is all about the ultimate motive. For most of modern history, we've pretty much viewed energy as a basic right. It's supposed to be abundant, affordable, and just there for everyone. It's the power that runs everything else in our lives. But the source argues that a whole new paradigm is being pushed, thinking of energy as a privilege. This changes the game completely. It reframes energy as something that is scarce, expensive, and, this is the critical part, something that can be controlled, limited, or even rationed out. So this is really the crux of the entire argument. The source claims the ultimate goal of weakening the grid is to intentionally shift our entire relationship with energy, from something that's a universal right to something that's a controllable privilege. And the reason for doing that? The argument is that if you can control a population's access to energy, you have an incredibly powerful tool for societal control. All right, let's pull all this together and look at the final question this whole perspective leaves us with. What should we take away from all this? So just to recap the viewpoint we've walked through, the argument being presented is that the grid failures and the crazy high energy prices we're seeing aren't just a string of bad luck or simple mismanagement. They're being framed as the predictable and even intended result of a deliberate policy. And so, the source material leaves us with this one final, pretty intense question to chew on. Is our fundamental access to energy being reshaped right before our eyes? Is it moving away from being a public right that empowers everyone and shifting towards becoming a tool of control? That's a challenging thought to end on. Thanks for tuning in.